Hello everyone, Jenny here again for another video on an important theory in economics. I'm pretty sure most of you all might have heard about this, and it's known as the theory of demographic transition. So stay tuned throughout to see what this theory means. The theory of demographic transition, as I mentioned to you before, this is going to be the topic today in our video. This theory is the most important theoretical idea in social demography, and it was developed in 1929 by the American demographer Warren Thompson. Having observed changes in birth and death rates in industrialized societies, Thompson devised a simple but powerful theory. According to this theory, economic and social development proceedings have an impact both on mortality and fertility. So, talking simply about what this theory states, it states that as economic and social development proceeds, the mortality and fertility of the population typically declines sequentially from high to low levels. So, this can be seen on the graph that you can see right now on the screen. And as you can see in the graph, the starting point is the pre-modern or the pre-industrial stage, which is the stage 1, in which you can witness high fertility, which is commonly combined with high mortality, which generates slow population growth. But the end point is the post-transition or the post-industrial stage, where you can witness low fertility and mortality rates. So this indicates that there is a low rate of natural increase at the latter part, and which implies that the absolute size and the rate of growth of population have stabilized. So, as you can see, demographic transition itself describes the process of accelerated population growth that occurs between the initial and the final stages that you witness in the graph. Not only that, the underlying reason for such population growth is mainly because of urbanizing or industrializing. And also the mature industrial stages, it lies in improvements in mortality generally, preceding a corresponding fall in fertility. So even though this is what is generally accepted, I'm pretty sure that you might be aware there is so much of beliefs out there regarding this situation. But most effectively, to reduce fertility and hasten demographic transition, this theory is considered as the base. However, some people argue that development itself is the most effective contraceptive that takes care of the people by giving them a higher living standard, and population will then take care of itself. Well, we consider today's lifestyle of most people, yes, that's true to a greater extent. But much empirical evidence supports an alternative thesis, which suggests that post-war fertility declines in developing countries, and it has stemmed largely from deliberate efforts to control fertility through education, propaganda, and organized family planning policies, which is based on the use of modern contraception. Certainly, official Chinese policies to reduce population growth reflect the combined process of fertility decline, and definitely a shift to deliberate fertility control. However, we cannot say that just such policies only have led to this demographic transition in China currently, but there have been several reasons which have led to this situation that China faces today, which we're gonna look in deep in this video too. So, as I said before, we're gonna look deeper into how the demographic transition has taken place in China. So to look at this, first we analyze what are the demographic trends in China since 1949, which gives us much of a view that was indicated in the previous graph that we witnessed. So first of all, just a word of caution is required to the quality of China's demographic data, because data problems have been a major source of difficulty for scholars seeking to analyze Chinese demographic trends. So the quality has improved greatly since 1949, especially in the early 1980s. But the training of data collectors, statisticians, design of population census and surveys, although improved, we can consider a certain margin of error. Nevertheless, the task of estimating China's entire population remains enormous. And the most recent, which was the 6th national census, was undertaken on the 1st of November 2010, and 10 million investigators were deputed to visit every household in towns and townships throughout the country to make on-the-spot registrations. So as you can imagine, many problems were encountered. Quite apart from temptations by parents to conceal births or by officials to falsify data in order to show a better result, it has also become much harder to track population changes. Whereas many tens of millions of migrants are moving around China as a result of the weakening of formerly strict household registration controls, these problems have increased a lot. And the consensus view is that official Chinese population stats conceal a significant downward bias. That's that population is in fact greater than it seems, but it's just a view. So, yes, with these information, scholars have come into certain conclusions about the demographic trends of China, which you can see. So, you can see clearly in this table the estimates of China's total population from the year 1949 up to the year 2013, where we have selected several years where the data could be found from the National Bureau of Statistics in China. So I think when you witness the figures, you can see that population growth since 1949 has not followed a consistent path. And as you can see, in the first period from the early 1950s to the early 1970s, China's population growth was rapid, which was averaging over 2% per annum. And as a result, total population increased from 542 million to 872 million between the years of 1949 to 1972. I'm pretty sure those figures are not much confusing for you, as they have been given yearly as per the stats. And however, if you go through these numericals properly, you can find a predominant period, which is between 1958 and 1962. As you can see, this is the major interruption associated with this trend, and therefore this major interruption is called the Great Leap Forward. And it will be much clearer to you if you look at these numbers in terms of the average annual rate of population growth, which you're going to see next. So, as you can see in this table, it indicates the average annual rate of population growth in China between 1949 and 2013. So to derive these results, they've used the same information that we looked at the previous consideration. So in this case, we're highlighting a little bit on the Great Leap Forward, which was the major interruption in the trend of demography in China. So this Great Leap Forward between 1958 and 1962, as indicated, says that Mao's impatience with the pace of growth and his belief that a more indigenous strategy would suit Chinese conditions better than the Soviet model led. And this, in 1958, led to the launch of the GLF, or the Great Leap Forward. So, more a vision than a plan, its rationale was that a policy of technological dualism. In other words, they were thinking of walking on two legs. So, budgetary investment would continue to be concentrated on industry, which is considered the modern leg, in order to maintain the momentum of heavy industrial growth. Meanwhile, the unprecedented mass mobilization of the supposedly underutilized rural labor force, which was facilitated by the integration of all farmers into large-scale communes, would promote more rapid agricultural growth, which was the traditional way. And also, it would support industry through the establishment of rural factories, which was specially related to backyard steel furnaces. So during this period, the great leap forward, walking on two legs, meant that they were going to focus on the modern leg as well as the traditional leg. As I mentioned before, the modern leg was the industrial growth and the traditional leg was the agricultural growth. So budgetary investment was sufficiently provided for both of these considerations. And it was the plan of Mao, and this is why you can see interrupted level of growth increase during these years. So anyway, this Great Leap Forward strategy turned out to be a disaster. Actually, it led to a catastrophic humanitarian and economic crisis, especially between the years of 1960 and 1961, during which 30 and 45 million people died from starvation or such associated diseases, which was the worst man-made disaster in human history. And its origins actually lay in the economic mismanagement of agriculture, which was a breakdown of the statistical reporting system, and the raising of economic targets to increasingly absurd levels as part of Mao's vision of the potential of GLF. So this is clearly a good lesson for the current policymakers too, because the effects of a certain policy can land in a great disaster if we do not manage it properly. However, if you can look at the figures shown here, in contrast, the second period, which was from the 1970s until the present day, we can see unprecedented success by the government in limiting population growth. In less than 2 decades, the rate of natural increase has more than halved. So indeed, this suggests that by the end of 20th century, China had completed its demographic transition, which is great. But although not literally unprecedented in modern times, South Korea and Taiwan both recorded equally spectacular declines in population growth in a shorter period of time. And the Chinese achievement is remarkable, bearing in mind the sheer size of its population. So I think with this it's clear that Chinese policies, although they failed at a certain instance, they've learned from their lessons and they have been successful in controlling their population growth and reducing or minimalizing the population growth impact on the country's economy. So, having identified these two distinct periods in the data, a number of important structural features are concealed within these figures, which we will address later in another video. Stay tuned with us.